In this video, I want to talk about how all of this came together. I used a bunch of different tools. I used Midjourney, I used Adobe Express, I used the beta version of Photoshop with generative fill and the replace tool. Let's take a look at this. Here's the image. This is the main image of the castle, and I just put in cyberpunk castle in the mountains with a forest, surrounded by a forest with volumetric clouds. This was a African-American cyberpunk soldier, full body, although I wanted to get the feet, but sometimes Midjourney, no matter what you say, you don't get feet. So full body away from the camera. And we're going to start off with the main image here. So this is where we start. So, and I put this image here because I wanted it to be in the background, right? And then I went to the generative fill, and essentially here what I did was I just kind of, because this is the one I end up using. Let's go ahead and delete this. And what I do, I select it, then I invert. And the reason I'm going to invert because I want to fill in the background. So rather than selecting the image, I want the background selected. I then expand the selection by 20. So that way, if we zoom in here, you can see that we get some of the image itself. So this way, Photoshop knows that it's a continuation of this image. All right. But I also feather it, not by much, but just so, because sometimes I feel like if you don't feather it, you get a harsh line. But that 1 pixel is just enough to kind of help it out a little bit. Say generate. Now I could put something in here to generate something different, but I just want to fill in the background. So I'm going to hit generate and then let Adobe, I guess now it's Firefly, is what they're using here. And I'm just going to let the AI look at the image, figure out what to fill in. And you can see it does a pretty good job. I'm really liking this generative fill. I really do like it. Now we can toggle through to see what other options we have. I kind of like that. Not sure about that. It kind of put a little city down here, so that's not going to work. But basically that's what I did. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. And here's the one I settled on. All right. So I did that. Came in, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. We'll come back to these two. Okay. Then I put the soldier in, and the first thing I did was desaturate him a little bit. Add a levels adjustment layer. Add a curves adjustment layer, and just to get the color. And I did the quick route with this one. Let me turn this off, and I will add another curves adjustment just in case you've never did it like this. Basically, I come up here to the hamburger menu and go to auto options. And with auto options, I'm going to select fine, dark, and light colors. I'm going to take the shadows, and I'm going to find the darkest shadow on this image. Take the light, I'm going to find the lightest image on this. Okay. And that's a quick way to kind of color grade them. It's the slick version, but you can see that's what I did to get to get this, but we still had to do a little work. I put another levels. Okay. And in fact, this right here is just this is the highlights. So you can see I threw some highlights on it. Some shadows. Another curves adjustment layer. And then a color lookup just to give it that I kind of like this color adjustment layer. This is the bleach, and it really just kind of like pops out the highlights, darkens the shadow, so a really big contrast. So I like using that one. And then I use one more to put the blue back in, and as you can see that with the bleach, you can see that I toned the opacity down. So I'm at 65%, because if it's at 100%, you can see it's really intense. So I took it down to 65%. Okay. Now let's come back down here and see what I did. So we have him, and then this is where I wanted some trees here. So I said I did another generative fill, and this time I told it I want trees peeking out of the clouds, and this is what it gave me. The problem is it added this, and I needed to get rid of that. So you cannot use the replace tool on a generative layer. Okay, so what I did was I rasterized the layer and then used the replace tool to remove it. So that's one of those things that if you need to work with that generative layer, you have to rasterize it. All right. So another thing I put in, I wanted some bats, and on this one, it was okay, so if I turned off what I did, you can see it was really dark. It was really dark. So I took a brush tool, really low flow. I think I took the opacity down to 37, and I brushed with white on the mask, so that way I can kind of fade the bats into the cloud. So that's how I got that. Without it, you can see that it doesn't fit. Okay. All right. Then I used a soft light layer, a layer with soft light, basically 50% gray, and I just painted in black so I can darken the bottom. You can see, darken that up a little bit. Once everything is done, so this is the image, and then I converted it to a smart object. So basically collapse everything into one layer, and let's see. So the first thing I did was I put on the camera raw. Okay, and in the camera raw, I just used a preset. If we come in here, one of the things I try to do when I'm working with it won't let me bring my camera raw over to the other screen. Okay. So one of the things I did with the camera, what I do with Camera Raw, I use a lot of presets. So I just go in, select the preset, change the intensity on that preset. The other thing here, I use a blur gallery. So if we turn that back on, and that's just to give it a depth of field. So we get the depth of field by blurring this out. So just give it a little background. Now, the final thing was the intensity of these blues. I kind of don't like them. So what I did was I brightened it up a little bit and then did a final desaturation just to kind of bring down those blues a little bit. And this is the final image. Okay, so we went from this and this to this. Right. So the final thing, my final thing on this is that I kind of feel like generative AI, Midjourney, and all these other tools will make it easier. But as you can see, I still did a lot of work in Photoshop to get the final version. It's just that now I don't have to go out and hunt for a castle, for the right castle. I don't have to go out and hunt for the guy in the right uniform, with the right perspective, in the right size. So to me, that's the benefit of the AI, is that you don't have to do those things, and it makes it a little, I say, more fun, because as you know, you can spend hours and hours hunting down the right images. And I've seen guys have 30 layers of assets and 400 layers of editing. This just kind of cuts some of that out, especially if you're not really trying to, it's a hobby. This is a hobby for me, so I'm not trying to spend, 4 days on one image. But that's it. Just give you guys an idea of how we bring all of these tools together to create something new, something fresh, and something that we want, without spending all of the time. Total amount of time I spent on this, about an hour, when typically I spend about 4 hours putting together a photo manipulation. So that's it. We are out of here. Appreciate you guys watching.